Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Zwift Power Up Cycling Podcast. This is episode 25. I'm Matt Rowe, here with Greg and Kev. What's new, guys?
Hey, mate. Yeah, just got back from Long Beach with a week with the Zwift crew, as you know, and yeah, what a great week it was, and lots of fun things in the pipeline.
Absolutely, yeah, and since then I managed to have a week at home, but about to head off to Switzerland in a few days for a quick training camp over there.
Awesome. Yeah, as you say, good week in LA, and I've had a great couple of weeks as well. Went to the week in LA, followed by a week in Mallorca. Held a training camp over there, which is good fun. A real mixed ability group, riders who cycle once a month when the weather's good, right up to sporty riders and aspiring pros, just giving them a week's training. I would say in the sun, but we had a bit of torrential rain the first few days. But great roads, good fun. So yeah, that was awesome. But looking to today's podcast, so we had a guest. I had a chat with Kevin Vermaak, who is the founder of the Cape Epic mountain bike race. Now, you may or may not know what that is. But yeah, I had a chat with Kevin about the event, why he started it, the legacy he's leaving across South Africa, and the world-class field the event attracts. So here is my chat with Kevin. Lovely. Well, hi Kevin. Thanks for taking the time out to talk to us about the Cape Epic.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Good man. So first off, Kevin, what is the Cape Epic?
So the Cape Epic is a two-person team mountain bike stage race, 8 days, 8 stages, and it attracts riders from all over the world, from professionals and amateurs. That's a unique ingredient to the race, that it's absolutely professional, the world's best riders, Olympic medalists and world champions, but then amateurs not like you necessarily, but certainly like me and a lot of other folk that just choose to enter the race. And for a lot of them, it's potentially one of the more challenging physical endeavors of their lives, and they treat it as a bucket list event, which they travel to South Africa for. And the route is through some amazing mountain bike trails in the Western Cape. The prologue is always on the slopes of Table Mountain, and then we change the route every year, finishing at Val de Vie Wine Estate, near to Cape Town. And the popularity of the race, I guess, is linked to the fact that the trails around here are just incredibly beautiful, and they keep on building new trails, and the weather's good.
Nice, yeah. I went to Cape Town for my honeymoon. That's the only time I've been. Absolutely loved it. And mountain bikers galore. Mountain bikers, good weather, and wine were kind of three of the key things I took away from from Cape Town. And is there a maximum size field?
Yes, there is. We limit the number of entries into the race to 650 teams of 2. And in fact, just today we opened the entries for next year, and the early bird entries literally sell out in seconds.
Wow.
And so it's something that we control. We set the limit at 650 and it sells out immediately. We obviously hold back a bunch of entries for elite pro riders that enter much later in the year. But I mentioned earlier that the unique ingredient about the race is that you have the world's best riding shoulder to shoulder with amateurs. Well, let's not say shoulder to shoulder, but in the same race village, and potentially get to meet Schurter, Annika Langvaart, Anna van der Breggen was racing. In fact, it was amazing this year. We had so many former pro roadies from Oscar Freire, Alessandro Pataki, Robert Hunter, René Hasselbacher, Piretto Rodriguez, Cadell and George rode it last year. And so it's the one mountain bike stage race where all the cross-country riders participate in, because it's early enough in the season, doesn't interfere with the World Cup season, which normally starts about 2 months later. And also attracts, interestingly, it attracts a lot of athletes from other sporting codes, just because they're potentially retired and they want to do something that continues or at least feeds their competitive spirit. And certainly in the case of South Africa, it seems to have attracted a lot of rugby players. I think one year we had 3 former Springbok rugby captains participating, let alone Springboks. There's always 5 or 10 Springboks that actually enter the race every year. John Smith, the Springbok World Cup winning captain from 2007, has done the race 6 times.
Awesome. And in the evenings, I guess there's a bit of a social side to it as well. In the evenings, what's going on there? What's the vibe?
Well, look, there's 1,300 participants, but there's about 8,000 people that are traveling with the village at the moment, and actually living effectively en route. So we create a massive race village with tents which is the standard rider package, but I think almost half the participants now are either staying in mobile homes or booking out hotel accommodation close by. So it's quite a circus when it comes to town, and that's one of our biggest challenges actually in changing the route every year, because there are only so many locations in the Western Cape that can literally host the venue now. Because from a technological standpoint, we're trying to go into the remote countrysides. We also want to take the guys to remote parts of the Cape to get some beautiful scenery and some distant trails. But then obviously you need to have serious connectivity because of the media demands. So in a lot of the cases, we might commit to a venue 2 years in advance so that they can lay fiber and effectively pipe the venue, because they've got to have, whether it's plumbing to fiber cables, fiber optics put in, and that's part of the legacy that we leave in the towns where that hosts the race.
That's fantastic, and because I guess a lot of the riders kind of turn up, jump on their bikes, do their thing, enjoy the party, and then leave. But they don't realise all that cool stuff is happening in the background, all the prep up front, but leaving that legacy. That's a real nice touch. So again, only 650 teams though. What does someone do if they want to get a spot? What's the best chance of getting a spot? I guess it's the early bird tickets. So be quick.
Yeah, exactly. 650 is not a lot.
No.
But in terms of bike races, I guess if you think 1,300 guys on the trails, you have to manage it quite carefully, because the last thing you want in a mountain bike race is to have congestion.
Yeah.
In some cases, the winners are doing it in 5 hours. So it generally means the slowest riders are taking 10 hours. So you've been getting so many hours of daylight. So that's part of the limitations. There's many other reasons as well why we limit the field to only 1,300. One of the challenges over the years has been to how to manage the demand, because the first race back in 2004 sold out in 3 days. Second one sold out in 5 hours. And then ever since then, we've had a combination of early bird and lottery entrants into the race. And in fact, that's still how we do it. So we do an early bird allocation, which is 100 teams. And then we do a lottery system where you've got 3 months until the end of May, where you can pay a $10 lottery ticket, which goes to charity. And then also we have a number of races around the world, which are part of the Epic Legend series, namely the Swiss Epic in Switzerland, obviously, and the Pioneer in New Zealand, where you can participate, and if you win your age group, then you get a guaranteed slot in the Epic. And then another way is you could work at the race. So if you volunteer, you get a guaranteed, not a free entry. In fact, there's so many things at the race that are in high demand, including volunteer slots. So we have a waiting list. We have a 3 times oversubscription for volunteer slots. And if you come and volunteer at the race, then you can get a guaranteed entry the following year.
Good. That's good. That's a good way to get the volunteers in, because without the volunteers, without the staff, the race doesn't go ahead. So nice little system.
Yeah, the volunteers, I should add, is they just do the fun jobs. The volunteers are typically friends and family of riders, and they buy accommodation packages from us and then work at the water point, primarily just the water points, and just like handing out the drinks. We've got over 1,000 staff that are working at the race. So it's not. They're not doing the heavy lifting.
Got you, yeah. Not assembling starts and finishes, yeah. And the race has been going many years, but you've only ridden it twice. Once was it 3 years ago, and again this year. How did your race go in your category?
Yeah, I loved it. A lot of people are surprised when they say, "Oh gosh, you've only ridden it twice." But the reality is that it's a full-time job for us.
Yeah.
We've got over 30 full-time staff that work on the race year-round. And so it's effectively running a company, and it's showtime when the race comes around. But I've had the privilege 3 years ago in 2016, I rode it for the first time, and then this year again. And I always say it's much easier to ride the race than to work at the race, and it really is, because it's a tremendous experience, and there's great camaraderie working amongst the crew. It's like a big family of people that have been involved for many years. But riding it is truly special in a different way, and it certainly delivers an experience that is in high demand, because folks just keep on wanting to come back and ride it every year. For me personally, it was special because I rode with a very good friend of mine with whom I participated in La Ruta de los Conquistadores, which is a 3-day mountain bike stage race in Costa Rica way back in 2002. In fact, that's where I had the idea for the Cape Epic. I was living in London at the time, and myself and one of my best friends went across to Costa Rica, did the race, and it was lying on the beach in Costa Rica then that I had the idea to create a stage race in South Africa. He came to do the first race in 2004. I needed, I didn't know whether it was going to work or not, so I made sure my friends signed up to do the race. And he did the first race and has never come back to see it again since then. And it was a privilege to ride with him this year.
Awesome. That was his first time. So he was a newbie.
No, so he rode it in 2004, the very first race. And then, we rode it again this year. So it was his second, my second, except, 16 years apart.
Got you. Absolutely. And your preparation, just jumping back a sec, you crashed in November, so only a couple of months out. Not ideal preparation.
No, not at all, in fact. I was... it's funny how these things work. I intended to do some Ironmans this year too, so I'd been looking forward to getting a new time trial bike. The first ride on my time trial bike, just something crazy, such a schoolboy era, just getting faster and faster and feeling in quite good shape at that time of the year. And I just stupidly forgot that time trial bikes don't corner very easily and overshot a corner. It's really a schoolboy era. It's embarrassing to say, but I was doing 45 k's an hour around a corner and just got off the edge.
Nightmare. So then your training and your preparation. I know you jumped on Zwift and you used Zwift in the preparation. How did all that pan out for you? And I know Anika's got this training workout series for the Cape Epic that started in January. When did you first jump on Zwift?
Well, it was just after that November period, in fact, because part of it was me injuring myself, but another big part of another big motivation getting on Zwift was the fact that my riding partner Andrew Hunt he's a Brit living in Costa Rica, and literally we crossed the finish line together at La Ruta in 2002. And then, I moved to South Africa to start the Cape Epic. He ended up moving to Costa Rica. And we had literally ridden for 2 hours together in the George Bush National Park in Texas a few years back. And the second time we rode together since 2002 was at the prologue. I mean, in real life, I was at the prologue on Sunday. And it's not exactly the best way to prepare for the Epic.
No.
Being apart is about the most important thing. But what we could do is we could actually ride together on Zwift, and we use Zwift more for that than necessarily joining Annika's training rides, which were good as well. But it was more the fact that him and I could kind of meet up in the virtual world and take on some challenges together, and ride together in the virtual world. And initially it was just a fun thing, but then in the end we actually did some real training rides that had an impact on our performance. And
great.
And I think that was probably the most special thing about Zwift, and that was a catalyst to get me into it. And then obviously it was just it was quite addictive after that.
Yeah, because obviously the event you've got to stick together, haven't you? So you're riding with your partner for the whole event, so you've got to make sure you're reasonably well balanced in terms of ability.
Yeah, if you ask whether it's the world champion or it's the guy at the back of the field, if you ask him what is the most important ingredient for success at the races, it's always choosing a partner.
Sure. And
choosing the right partner with similar goals and similar ability levels. And so it's normally unthinkable that someone would take on the Epic without doing a couple of races. Or even at least some training rides, but ideally some races together in advance. But I guess Andy and I just went on trust.
Wow, really does give you that true team spirit. You literally can't leave each other's side for 8 days. So that 2-minute rule, that really is tight. So almost if you've got a weak spot, you need to make sure your teammate also has a weak spot. So say it's climbing, you may as well both be weak at climbing, because if one of you is weak, you both got to go at the pace of the slowest rider.
Yeah, mountain biking is slightly different to road cycling in the sense that there's nowhere to hide in mountain biking.
Yeah.
And, you've literally got to be going full gas from the start gun. And in fact, ironically, that's, when you have a road cyclist comes across to do the race, that's always the first thing they say is that you've literally got to be concentrating for the entire duration of the stage. Not only because of the pace, but because also of the fact of the terrain. And I would say that everyone has a good day, everyone has a bad day, and the partnership is what makes it really special. Because it's funny, I was chatting to Lars Forster, who's Nino's partner at the race this year, the European cross-country European cross-country champion, and he said he was one of the happiest moments of the race was when Nino asked him to slow down. And it just goes to show that even from the outside, Nino is invincible, and it's almost like whoever can stay with Nino wins the race. Whoever he rides with, but it's not necessarily the case. It's that his partner also has some days that he's feeling better and is maybe a little bit stronger than Nino on the day. So it's truly a team event. And also the other thing about mountain biking is that you don't have a support vehicle trailing you at all times. And if you get a puncture, you've got to stop and fix it. If you have a mechanical that's more impactful than a puncture, you've got your partner there to get you through. And we have 3 tech zones at the 3 border points throughout a 100-kilometer stage. So, if something happens 10 k's before that tech zone, you've got to nurse your partner's bike or your bike to the next tech zone and get it fixed at the tech zone and then carry on riding. So that's another situation where you actually really want to be with a partner. You don't necessarily want to be on your own. I must say, though, that the 2-person concept, there's so many reasons for it now, and it creates a lot of drama in the race. And the TV coverage around the 2-person team format is phenomenal because it's the uniqueness of the race. But origins of the 2-person format goes back to the early days where the mountain bike stage race concept was actually you and your mate mountain biking, taking you to areas in the wilderness where you might not normally be able to get to, and you'd want to be with your mate in that situation. And since then, it's obviously developed to be the de facto format. But it's still something so special. If you take the amateurs, it's just so special to go through 6 months, a year of training and preparing and thinking, and then finally you do the race together, and you're surrounded by 650 other teams that have got the same camaraderie between potentially their best friend, and certainly you create a very special bond with your partner when you have to stay with them for 40 hours in 1 week, or however long it takes you to finish the race.
Absolutely. If you're not friends at the start of the week, you're either going to be best of friends or worse enemies by the end of the week. I'm sure it's going to go one way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just looking at the 2, so again, Annika I think has won 5 editions of the Cape Epic, so she's the most successful Cape Epic rider.
She's the most successful woman in the field. Christoph Sauser, the multiple cross-country World Cup winner and mountain bike marathon champion as well. He's won it 5 times, as well as Carl Platt.
Wow.
So the 2 men that have both won it 5 times, and now Annika's the first woman to win it 5 times, and she's certainly going to be a favourite for next year because she's still certainly a longer format racing, marathon racing. She's still at the peak of her career.
So experience counts for a lot, I'm sure. I mean, Annika has won obviously 5 times. Nino has won before. Both with newbie partners, and how much do you think that experience helps a team, having someone who's been there and done the Cape Epic before?
Absolutely. I mean, Annika is a freak because she's won it every time she's participated,
wow,
which is absolutely unique. Nino, I think, rode it 4 times before he won it for the first time. He rode it last year. His partner dropped out, and so he's only won it 2 out of his 6 or 7 attempts.
Yeah, that goes to show you the standard of the event. I mean, a rider like Nino, he's only won it once out of 4 attempts.
I think he rode it for the first time in 2010.
Okay.
If I stand to be corrected. But I think even Christoph Sazer, he won it he rode in 2005 for the first time, and then he won it in 2006, and then it was about a 4-year drought because he was, just struggling to find the field is getting more and more competitive, and then that's when you really need a partner that's also as strong as yourself to win the race. And certainly in the early years, it was quite a challenge to get teams that had 2 riders that were good enough to race for 8 days, because it's quite different. I mean, the concept of mountain bike stage racing, whilst for amateurs it's been around for, I don't think that popular, but it existed for quite a while. But for the World Cup riders, it was only until the Cape Epic came along that the World Cup riders actually focused on trying to win a stage race. And so in fact, that was for me one of the challenges in the early years when I was promoting the Cape Epic. I was traveling around to the World Cups, trying to secure and entice the World Cup teams to come out to South Africa and race the Cape Epic at the beginning of the season.
Wow, yeah. And the one-day mountain bike events are normally, real top-end efforts, maybe hour and a half, maybe 2 hours max. This is a very different challenge, isn't it? I mean, how do people, in your experience, what's the kind of the general approach to training for Cape Epic, this super endurance mountain bike event? And I've heard some people refer to it as the mountain bike Tour de France, version of the Tour de France, and just such an extreme event.
Yeah, I think, there's normally, say, 3 stages in the week that the winners would take between 4.5 and 5.5 hours to finish. So, and like I said, there's no way to hide in mountain biking. It's, you're getting full gas from the start. There's no coasting in a peloton for the first 2 hours of the stage. So, and absolutely, it's incredibly taxing. And I think that was just something quite fortunate about the Epic, that we could have it in March, that our season allows us to have it in March, and then the World Cup season typically starts in late April or May. And it allows the cross-country World Cup riders sufficient time to recover before they go into the World Cup season. And in fact, it turns out it's not a bad thing to have this type of training, more of the endurance and the longer days of riding in March. And then the guys typically take a few weeks to recover, and then they start increasing the intensity as they get closer to the start of the World Cup season. And it hasn't worked for everyone. I mean, some people, they have a good Cape Epic, and then their World Cup season, they struggle for the rest of the World Cup season because it just takes so long to recover. But for a lot of the guys now, they're getting the training format correct so that they can get sufficient rest and then, increase the intensity and have a phenomenal World Cup season. And Nino's most successful season ever was in 2017 when he went into the season as a reigning Olympic gold medalist and then won the Cape Epic, won 6 out of 6 World Cups and won the World Championships. Wow. So certainly for him, the Cape Epic was the first race of his most successful season ever.
Good stuff. And just thinking about on Zwift, all the courses are road-based. There's a few dusty sections, but that's as close as it really comes to mountain biking. What about a mountain bike course on Zwift one day? Do you fancy that?
It's an interesting one because it's something that I discussed with Zwift a long time ago, actually. And obviously the kicker climb has changed things a little bit, the raising of the fork. But you also need in mountain biking, it's really the terrain that impacts your power, because it's not only the ascent and the climb, it's what you're riding on, and that's always what catches riders out at the Epic, because it's pretty rough and rocky and dusty and rugged terrain in the Epic. And so someone might see a 400 meter climb and think, oh, that's not too much compared to an alpine climb of 1,500 meters or something. Yeah. But it's pretty damn tough when you're going with fat tires, and you need those fat tires just for the grip on the terrain, and then you're bouncing around. So I think that's going to be really difficult to get feedback into the Zwift experience. But what we have been talking about is potentially the prologue route on Table Mountain is something that hasn't, we're not intending to change that part of the route, and it's a well marked, it's public, it's open to anyone to ride on Table Mountain if you've got an activity permit. and we've started putting some shock measurement devices onto some of the pros' bikes, so we can start getting a feel for effectively measuring the movement of the shocks throughout the terrain of the prologue, and then comparing that to their power output, etc., etc. Wow. And eventually, it could be that we can try and simulate the prologue course, which is it's a 20-kilometer course with 600 meters of climbing on the slopes of Table Mountain.
Sounds exciting. And yeah, just thinking openly about the specific demands of mountain bike versus road. Yeah, so different. And I do a little bit of casual mountain biking, and you go into some of these steep banks, and they may only be 10, 15 seconds, but because they're so steep and so rough, you kind of go into it, and you can't really change gear mid climb, because you can't lose that momentum, and because all the force on the pedals, your gears are going to slip slightly. So you kind of go in at maybe 120 revs a minute. Halfway up it, you're at 70 or 80 revs a minute, and by the top, you're just grinding over the top at maybe 40 revs a minute. That's where you obviously got to be so strong for mountain biking. But again, getting that kind of those capabilities into Zwift, that is going to be super tricky. But if it is ever mastered, that will be an absolute game changer, and what great fun that would be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't imagine what technology can bring in the years ahead. I mean, because who would have thought that just the idea of Zwift, I mean, who would have imagined that like 10, 15 years ago? So I guess with time, these things are developed. If you can imagine them, they can be created at some point. But it's an interesting thing about your cadence coming down as you climb, and that's the tricky thing, because of if your cadence starts coming down, you end up having a less smooth rotation, and if you haven't got good traction on the ground, that's when you really start struggling, because you start slipping all over the show. And I mean, certainly in the Cape Epic, after a few 6-7 days in, people are so tired. We had some of these off-camber climbs through the vineyards, and I mean, Andy and I were just saying, like, this would be so easy if we were doing this on a normal ride, but after 6 days, you're just so absolutely broken. Every now and again, you feel like a battlefield. You'll hear back and you just hear someone shouting, and they'd be falling off because of camber climb. And it's certainly challenging.
What's the toughest terrain? Is it roots or rocks or just dust? What's the kind of toughest terrain that you have to conquer in the Cape Epic?
So I think for me certainly it's when it gets really, really rocky, and you think you've got a full suspension mountain bike, but it feels like you're riding a hardtail, because it's just so rocky, and every time you put pressure on your pedal and you think you're going to be going forward, and your wheel just bounces over a rock and the rock spins out, and you end up not going as far forward as you should be for the amount of rotation. But so that's for me the most challenging, it's getting all the ingredients together, because you've got to have the right pressure in your tires. You've got to make sure you have the right cadence in that situation. You've got to pre-select your gears, and so it's that's what I love about mountain biking. There's so many factors that is incorporated into performance on the day.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, Kev, it'd be great to chat. Anything for next year? Anything exciting in the pipeline you can share?
Well, something we've invested a lot of money in lately is our live streaming. So we've introduced, started using a technology where we have e-bikes e-bikes ridden by former professionals and former winners of the race that have got onboard cameras, and they use what's called a bonded cell phone technology, where they have literally 8 SIM cards in these transmission packs onto the back of the cameras. And we're sending that signal back, and so just exactly like you'd get on road cycling, where you'd have a motorbike following the peloton, and certainly in Tour de France, they send signal back via radio links to aeroplanes and helicopters flying overhead. And obviously, we can't do that because there's no peloton in mountain biking per se. You're so spread out. You need like 10 different cameras, and then the transfer or the aerial device that's bringing the signal back. You need one for every motorbike, so it's not feasible in mountain biking. And so we started using this technology where you literally have 8 cell phone SIM cards on the camera, and it's the price is the affordability of that allows you to have a number of e-bikes following the lead riders or following the women that are further back in the field. And send the live feedback. We get HD broadcast quality signals coming back from the lead mountain bikers and from these e-bikes, and we started to put them into live production, and that's working incredibly well. We've got normally use a 2 helicopter production, 8 ground cameras on e-bikes and motorbikes, and it's we're breaking new territory because certainly there's no other mountain bike stage race in the world that's giving live coverage, and for us it's fun because we've got some phenomenal partners. We've got Dimension Data that is also the partner of ASO for all the ASO races, including the Tour de France, and they work with us too to develop out this technology. And we had phenomenal success this year to literally broadcast from inside and literally behind the wheel of Nino Schurter going full gas on some single speed. It's on some single tracks.
Helping the world see what a fantastic event you've created. Get more eyeballs on it and make it more, give it a bigger profile. Well, awesome. Good to chat, Kevin. I'll leave you to it. I'm sure you're gonna have a nice evening celebrating the end of Cape Epic tonight. So enjoy and thanks for chatting.
Thanks very much, Matt.
Well, there you go. What do you make of the Cape Epic then, guys?
Yeah, and for me, the real highlight is that in such a short space of time, the event has become hugely popular, and the quality of field it's attracting already, it's certainly going to take some big steps forward from here.
So absolutely. And again, the strapline it's sometimes given, the mountain bike version of the Tour de France, I think that's fully justified. So long may it continue, and a great event that Kevin is leading. Okay, moving on to the session, the Zwift session that we're going to discuss. So the session is found in the Zwift library under the 60 to 90 minutes to burn, and it's the 2 by 20 minute FTP intervals. And at first glance, you may think this is 2 20-minute flat-out efforts, kind of max test efforts, but actually these are efforts at threshold. So not 20-minute tests, but 5% lower in power. So you're basically doing a total of 40 minutes riding at a pace you could sustain for around an hour, with the rest halfway. So as Kev, as you would say, I think, tough but achievable.
Yeah, this is one of those sessions where you cannot deny the benefit and the quality of training by doing long efforts on an ergo indoors. It is really effective training, but it's pretty head cracking as well to do 20 minutes at a hard pace. So yeah, the quality of training is very good. Mentally, it's a pretty tough one as well.
What I used to find, I would do, Kev, we would switch it up a little bit, and we actually spend a little bit of time just over threshold and a little bit of time just under threshold. So you were actually just varying the whole time, and it just made that 20 minutes go just that little bit long, a little bit quicker. It was instead of just sitting at that one constant pace. And I mean, there are guys that can do that no problem, but just sometimes when you vary the pace a little bit, it can be it just seems like that 20 minutes goes a little bit faster.
So how about then if you're going to do this session, take it out of erg mode, and let the terrain dictate and vary the resistance a little bit for you, just so it is a little bit less monotonous. Because again, in erg mode, literally sat there grinding away could be a bit tough, even on Zwift. So perhaps play around with giving the session a go in erg mode and out of erg mode for a bit of variety. That's
really good advice there, Matt. Like you say, just for the mental aspect, that way you have to chase the power. Your cadence is going to change because of the changing terrain. It just makes the whole effort more engaging, which is what Zwift is. So yeah, really good advice there. Yeah, do the session, but do it out of erg mode, and force yourself to hit the target power.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like you said, there's no denying the fact that session, you'll absolutely get some amazing gains from it. So don't forget about that. That's always a nice goal at the end of a session, is it? This is not a waste of time. I'm actually going to get gains from this, and I would always love that. I know, right, this is not what I would call junk miles. I always hated junk miles. Yeah. So it's you're getting a really good session out of this.
Yeah, well, maybe not a session to do too frequently, but maybe throwing it in, once a fortnight, once every couple of weeks. Probably not a bad idea for most of us. Okay, cycling terminology. So Kev, you're on the button, mate. Greg, do you wanna get the clock ready?
Righto, mate. You have 30 seconds, Kev, to explain the meaning cafe legs, starting now.
Okay, cafe legs. I think this one's an easy one. This is where you go for your coffee stop with your mates, you have a few brews, you get back on the bike, and from the great effects of the caffeine, your legs feel awesome. And in those first few kilometres, when you roll out from the cafe stop, your legs feel great, and you're tearing the legs of everybody else from the bunch there, and you're the one forcing the pace because you're feeling great.
3,
and that's cafe
2,
legs.
1. Well done. Well timed.
Nice. Well articulated.
Did I get it right?
However, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. I've got a slightly different understanding of cafe legs, and it's kind of almost the polar opposite. For me, cafe legs, when you come out of a cafe and you've been sat down for half an hour not feeling great, and your legs kind of stiffen up, it's the first 5 or 10 minutes you've got cafe legs when you feel really bad on a bike and uncomfortable. So, yeah, a bit of a difference there. Where are you sat, Greg?
Well, Rowie, that's because you sat at the cafe for 3 hours eating blooming muffins and pies and cake.
Well, Greg, we should probably mention a story from the Zwift offsite when we actually went for a cafe stop on one of our rides there, and a certain Matt Rowe tried to order a flat white, and no one in America knew what a flat white was, and so he said, "Oh well, bugger it, just give me a beer instead."
They knew exactly what that was. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Tell you what they do well in the States around LA is cakes. I mean, some of the cakes we ate in LA. Oh my word!
I didn't have any.
Mate, I was on regime. I didn't eat any. It was just you. Again, Robbie. No wonder you have blooming cafe legs.
Tell you what we should do. Cafe legs then. Difference of opinion here. I think it's feeling bad after at a calf stop. You guys think it's feeling good. Let's stick it on Twitter and do a Twitter poll and see what the people think, and we'll see who's got it right. So again, I'll stick that on Twitter and we'll see how we go, and we'll report back next podcast. So moving on, quick fire question, guys. It's a pretty simple one: mechanical or electric gears?
Electric.
Yeah, I'm going electric as well. Just easy, isn't it? Easy, more reliable. It's the future.
Yeah, and now we're even at the point now where we're adjusting gears via Bluetooth from your phone now. It's just gone next level.
Yeah, that's the new SRAM 12-speed, is it?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so moving on then. Disc brakes or caliper brakes?
I'd love the disc brakes.
I'm going to stick with caliper brakes for now. I don't think disc brakes are quite ready for the mass market yet. Interesting.
I'm going to go disc brakes. And again, just coming back from Mallorca, going down some of the descents, I'm there on my caliper brakes. And, I'm not saying your hands get tired at the bottom, but it is a little bit harder. And you can see the guys on disc brakes are just out-braking you. I think the braking performance that disc brakes offer is, again, in my experience, just superior. But there are a few little irritations where you get kind of that rubbing. And I'm not sure how much it slows you down, whether it's just kind of a mental thing. But it is quite annoying.
Any noise is friction, isn't it? But I mean, I can tell you some stories, mate, of going down these climbs, like just seriously down these descents where in the rain, having to make back time, and you see the corner, you start pulling on your brakes, the caliper brakes, and nothing's happening for about 3 or 4 seconds. You're actually, that heart rate just goes, into your mouth, and then all of a sudden you get a grab, and it can be an uneven grab, it can be a lock up, it can be because all of a sudden you have to clear the surface of the rim. So it's just, honestly, it's made descending in the rain so much safer, and it's absolutely it's so force related. There's no variation. I just think from that perspective, it's just a massive improvement.
Yeah, of course, with caliper brakes, if you've got carbon rims in the wet, even worse braking performance. Where I think with discs is more of a consistent braking performance.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, the consistent. Exactly, that's the word I was after. It's a tough one. I missed it.
There you go. Teamwork. Good stuff. Okay, so electric gears and 2-to-1 split on disc brakes. Okay, guys, moving on to the Q&A section. We've got 4 questions, and the first question is from Martin Howe, sent in via email. And Martin's question goes: I find I climb pretty well against other riders my age, and I'm okay in a group on the flat, but lose minutes on descents. Any tips for descending safely and quickly? I'm fine on Zwift, so tips for in real life, please. Very good.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because there are tips that you can actually 100% use that will make you descend better. My very first tip I would give would be lower that centre of gravity. No trying to descend round corners up on your hoods. Always down on your hooks in your drops. It lowers that centre of gravity. It makes turning a lot easier. Second thing is always the counterbalance. So you move, if you're turning left, you move your body weight to the left, but you counterbalance by putting pressure on your right leg on the outside and your right arm, so it counterbalances the bike. The simplest way to descend, honestly, is follow a mate down a hill who goes all right, and he'll show you the line, he'll show you some braking points, and what I used to do when I would descend, and we would have some mad descents in the gruppetto trying to get back to the bunch. One of the tricks is, this is on a closed road obviously, so you can use it to some degree on a half road, but on a closed road you wouldn't actually hit the apex because you never knew where the apex was. So you always start a little bit to the inside of the corner. So you're never actually going to go 100% around that corner because you're not going to hit the apex. But what that does, that allows for time to actually adjust. If the corner keeps coming around at you, you've got more time to grab onto your brakes, and of course, I hope you don't jam on front. You always use most of your back brake, shift your weight to the back, more back brake than front brake. But I think the first couple of tips I would give would be lower that centre of gravity and follow a mate down that does descend and just get that confidence. It's definitely a confidence thing, there's no question.
Yeah, good one. And just to briefly add to that, you said about not knowing where the apex is. I remember Alex Dowsett, when he won the Giro time trial, he said a major factor that helped him go so quick and make up a lot of time on the descents was having the route on his Garmin, and he could tell obviously how sharp and how tight the bends are, and there's a few bends that look as if they're going to be tight, but actually you can take them full whack on the skis. So having a Garmin or having a computer on your bike with the route, you can see how steep or how tight, sharp the bends are, and you can adjust your speed appropriately.
That's actually a really good point you've raised there, Matt. Some of the guys in Katusha have actually, we use the Wahoo head units, and they've opted for the bigger head unit for that exact reason, to display the course map for descents to work out how tight the bends are. And the guys are actually looking at that while they're descending and working out how fast to go through the bends. So that's a good example where technology has really helped people's descending skills.
Oh man, that just sounds dodgy. There was an old mate of mine, Kenny Van Hummel, and he was having a real rough time in the Tour de France one year, and he was just getting dropped badly on the climbs, and he would come back in the back of the cars on the descents. He would catch gruppetto. This is how hard but what he said he was doing was looking at the cars that had GPS. So he's looking through the windows at the GPS.
Oh, jeez.
How many risks are you taking to make it back?
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, the poor fella, he didn't quite make it through the Pyrenees. He's alive. Don't panic. He's alive. He just didn't make time cut one day. He couldn't descend fast enough. But imagine that, looking at some team car's GPS to see what the next corner is.
Oh my word, that's outrageous.
That's next level. That is.
That is next level. Quality. There we go. All right. Question 2. So question 2 is from Crystal Linkford that was sent in via Facebook. Crystal's question reads, I find it so tricky to be efficient with my efforts during Zwift races, often averaging a far higher watts per kilo than others when I race that finish around me. Any tips for being more efficient with my efforts? At what point can I freewheel on Zwift and not lose the wheel? So I'll take this one. Quite a few points in here. I think for me, the biggest tip is all about being in that bubble. So being kind of that bubble where you're not too near the front, but you are still near the front. So certainly outside of the top 5 riders, trying to find as much shelter as possible, just like in real life. And there's such a thing called Super Tuck. Now I got this from Zwift Insider website, and it is if you're on a long descent and you want to maintain your position in a group, you can do so sometimes without pedaling. Believe it or not, you can maintain your position without pedaling, but there's certain criteria. So you can freewheel and stay with a group as long as you're on a decline of more than 3% and you're traveling over 58k an hour. So a decline of more than 3%, traveling over 58k an hour. And that, if you're hitting those two, you will maintain your position in a group. And this works perfectly until obviously the gradient changes. Maybe it goes shallower, maybe it's 2%, or your speed drops below 58k an hour. So watch out, and you need to be really alert to those changes. Otherwise, you will shoot out the back if you're not pedaling. You also need to avoid at all costs seeing that 1 meter, 2 meter, etc. gap show up. That means you're pushing your own wind. And sitting too far back, i.e. being out of the bubble that I referred to, if you sit too far back, means you're at risk of missing splits, being caught behind another rider who lets the wheel go. And you may be smack on the wheel in front, but if a rider 20 wheels up lets the wheel go, you're not 1, 2 or 5 meters behind, you're maybe 10 seconds back, and it's game over. So yeah, being really alert, being towards the front of a group. And of course, it's tricky because that's where everyone wants to be. But you really got to try and to do your best to be at the front. And also, if you're on the outside of a group and your avatar is in the aero tuck, it means you're not in the slipstream. So speed up or slow down to get your avatar on the hoods. And when your avatar's on the hoods, that's basically Zwift's way of telling you are in the shelter, because they're nice and relaxed, they're in the slipstream, and your avatar is not trying to get aero. That's only something I learned this week researching for this question from the guys at Zwift Insider. So thanks for the maintaining that great website, guys. And one last little tip is to start your effort to move up a little bit before you actually want to move up, like a couple of seconds. So say you're coming up into a little kicker into the volcano, is my favorite example. You need to start your effort 3 seconds earlier than you actually want to be applying the power, because there is, of course, a bit of a lag from when you apply the effort to when the turbo recognizes that increased power to when that increased power is applied in game and you realize that speed gain, speed benefit. So a couple of bits and pieces in there, Crystal. Hope that helps. And hopefully, that's going to help you lower your average watts per kilo for these Zwift races. All right, we'll move on to question 3. And question 3 is from Tommy Bowl, sent in via Twitter. And Tommy's question goes, I've heard a lot about fasted training, but it's tricky to know whether it is suitable for me. I don't have weight to lose. It's more about being more efficient. How do you fast when do you stop eating carbs? How long can you ride before eating? At what intensity? Thank you, and I love the podcast. So quite a few different bits and pieces in there. What do you reckon, Kev?
Okay, big question. Also a very good question as well, because fasted training is something that has become popular in some ways in recent times, and it's also something that is a bit misunderstood in some ways as well. So I guess, first of all, the key point here is that it's not about weight loss. That may be a result of it, but fasted training is all about making your body more efficient at accessing fat as its main fuel source. And we do that by limiting the supply of carbohydrates to our working muscles. So by limiting carbohydrate, obviously your body has to find the fuel from somewhere, and fat becomes the prioritized form of fuel. But the other benefit we get from fasted training is that we get an increase in mitochondria. And we've spoken about mitochondria in the past. We know that mitochondria is like the powerhouse cell of the muscles. It's where all the changes occur and the fuels can burn to combusted into energy. And one of the main effects of fasted training is increased mitochondria. Now, looking at ways to do fasted training, it does depend on your volume of training and the length of your rides as well. So if we look at a general bike rider who's training an hour a day of a morning, for them, obviously fasted training is going to occur by missing breakfast and doing an hour in the morning. But in many ways, that 1 hour isn't really enough to get the effects of fasted training, because your body stores so much carbohydrate that an hour it's not going to be depleted much at all. So my advice is that if you are the athlete, works a full-time job, has a family and so on, and gets to train 1 hour every morning, to do fasted training, you would start by the night before by doing what we call a sleep low. So from lunchtime onwards, you're still going to eat. So it's not about becoming calorie deficit, but it's about restricting carbohydrates from the afternoon onwards. So no carbohydrates at dinner as well or before bed. And then you're fasting through the night, wake up in the morning, do your 1 hour session. And that way, when you start your session in the morning, you really are starting with depleted carb stores and you are getting the benefit of fasted training. The other way to do fasted training is again in what we call train low. But this is what you could do on your weekend ride when you have more time, or if you're a professional and you have obviously all day to go training. So an example of a train low session is that, again, no breakfast, no carbohydrates at breakfast, so you can still take some kilojoules on board. And then you're going to go into your ride, and this is always performed at low intensity, these fasted rides. And this is where it does get challenging, and it really is up to the individual. So a long fasted ride, you're going to ride to the point where you start to feel hunger flat, you start to feel a bit lightheaded, you really do feel depleted. And when you get to that point, that's when you know you're starting to get the benefits of the fasted ride, and that's when you are going to have your cafe stop, because when you have a cafe stop, your body goes into replenishing mode and it wants to absorb carbohydrates. So you get to the point where you are hunger flat, lightheaded, feeling the effects of low carbohydrates, have your cafe stop, have some carbohydrates, your body is in replenishing mode, that way it soaks up the carbs, and you continue on for half hour or so after that. So a good addition to the fasted ride is to then take the carbohydrates on board and continue training for half an hour or an hour after that as well. The other method that you can use on your weekend long ride is what we call a recover low. So to do a recover low, you're going to have a nice healthy breakfast with carbohydrates, normal amount. You're then going to start your long ride. It could be from, say, about 3 hours as a minimum for a long ride. And you could have some carbohydrates in the first half an hour of that ride. But then in the second half of the ride, eliminate carbohydrates. And then when you finish your training ride, say you finish at lunchtime, no carbohydrates at lunchtime, no carbohydrates in the afternoon. You won't have carbohydrates until your evening meal. So that's called a recover low, and it gives quite a good effect, similar to the train low, where the body becomes more efficient at accessing fat as a fuel source. But also, a couple of key points here is that you don't want to do fasted training too often during the week. Really, twice a week is more than enough. If you do 2 good sessions of fasted training, you're going to get the benefit from it. But you need to keep in mind also that fasted training normally means lower intensity training as well. So to do, if you're doing any work above threshold, don't do fasted training on those days, because you need the carbohydrates to produce the power and the lactic acid. Twice a week, try one of the fasted methods. Like I say, if you were a working person, family and a full-time job and so on, you might do one of the sleep lows into a train low on the weekday, and then on the weekend you can try a recover low. So there's 2 different methods of putting in place fasted training. Big conversation to have. We could probably do a whole podcast on fasted training, but hopefully there's 2 ways you can implement fasted training into your regimen.
Because you think about it, when you are racing, you're not just using one fuel source, are you? So if you are more efficient at using fats, then of course you are going to get a benefit in any size race. No, it's a really interesting topic, because there's so many studies out there for and against, or different ways of doing it. So it's a really, like you said, we could do a whole podcast on it. It's really interesting.
There we go. Well, Tommy, there's a pretty comprehensive answer for you. Hopefully you can take something away from that. Okay, our last question, question 4, is from Freddie Waller, that was sent in via the Zwift forums. Freddie's question reads, "Hi there, I'm really enjoying the Zwift Power Up Cycling podcasts. Also, I have a question for the podcast Q&A section. Recently, I realised that the strength of my legs might be unequal. Right leg is stronger. Is this normal? Should I be doing something against it? And if yes, what exercises or training do you recommend?
The first part of that question, is this normal to be unbalanced? And I think the obvious answer there is yes. No one in the world is 100% balanced. No, even when you're carrying a suitcase, you're stronger on one side. You're dominant. You have a dominant side. So there's physiologically, no one is 50%, 50%. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. These new power meters, they're fantastic, and they do have this option of, pedaling efficiency and also pedaling power on each leg, 50% this side, 50% this side. It does flatten out, obviously, once we go higher intensity, but I'll let Kev explain that. My major point is, unless it's a massive difference like 35, 65 or 40, 60, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because there really isn't a massive problem. No one is 100%, 50%, 50%. So, but there is a way there are exercises you can do, and there are times when it does come closer to 50%.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Greg. This is kind of a problem that's resulted from new technology in power meters now, where people are measuring left and right power output, and we're realising that it's not equal all the way through. And like you said there, it's not a real issue. It's normal for most people. It's only an issue when, as you get to threshold and above, if there's an imbalance at that level there, then it's worth investigating further. But on your recovery rides, endurance rides, tempo rides, if there's an imbalance there, that's fine. That's just your dominant leg obviously being dominant. And then when you start to get to threshold and those maximal efforts, that's when you want to start to see an even power on both sides there. So normally not an issue for most people, but it's all interesting to follow anyway and see what kind of rider you are.
And as for a session to try and help even out any leg strength imbalance, you can try some one-legged efforts. So on Zwift is going to be the easiest way to do these efforts, not out on the road. It's obviously a lot more controlled. And the key is to stress each leg the same. So force each leg to complete the same workload to try and even out the strength. So for example, let's aim for 15 minutes of threshold. Now, the power output from one leg is obviously less than your threshold, your FTP. However, it's not as simple as being half the power. So I suggest you start on your strongest leg and use perception or feel to guide you for this session. And ride at threshold, or the perception of threshold, and take a note of the power output. So your threshold may be 200 watts, and the sensations of threshold with one-legged may be 120 or 130 watts. And you may split this 15-minute block on your stronger leg, your dominant leg, into 2 7.5-minute blocks. And then on your weaker leg, you want to ride for the same 15 minutes at the same power output, which will feel harder. And the key is to ensure you hit the same power output to help balance out your leg strength, not to widen the difference. And you may need to then do this 15 minutes as 3 5-minute blocks to make it more achievable.
Yeah, that's 100%. And we used to do that from, we grabbed that, the New Zealand team grabbed that from the AIS. They did a whole lot of study with one-legged training. And the theory that Dr. Dave Martin had was that it was also like you're actually stopping the blood, well, not stopping the blood supply, but you're limiting the blood supply to one leg, the one you're not using, and it's all going to the muscles and that you're exercising on that one leg. So if you look at and say I used to do efforts at 320 watts for 3 minutes, but that doesn't actually equate to 640 watts when you double it. But the pain that you had and the lactic acid that you could build up, it was because you were sending so much blood to that leg, and then you would swap legs and do the other leg. So there's definitely been quite a lot of study done on it, and it. But I think you're correct. If you want to close that gap, you definitely have to keep the power the same on each leg.
Can you just repeat that session there, Greg? So with one leg, you're doing 320 watts for how many minutes?
For 3 minutes. We'd do 3 minutes, and you'd do 3 of them, 3 by 3, and you'd do 320 watts, and then change legs. And same again. It was just.
There's a session for our listeners. I reckon there's a challenge. One leg, 300 watts for 3 minutes.
Horrible.
Who can do it?
It's horrible, mate.
That's a good challenge. I like that.
And what about technique then? So you're on Zwift. Where do you put, so the leg that's not clipped in, where do you put it?
Up on a chair, just outside your pedal that's not being used. And what they actually used to do was weight the pedal, so it would help with the kick over the top of your pedal stroke, so it would actually smooth out your pedal stroke a little bit for you. But I think nowadays with the heavy flywheels that we have on our trainers, like our smart trainers with Wahoo and Elite, etc. attacks, you don't need the weighted pedal, but you just have your foot out on the left hand side. And the other problem is you had to really open that hip angle. You could never ever put any power out in the drops. You had to be always up on your hoods, or on your top crossbar there. It was I'll tell you, it was probably one of the most unpleasant training exercises I think I've ever done in my career. It was horrendous.
Well, there you go, guys. Kev, enjoy Switzerland. Greg, have a good couple of weeks, mate. And speak to you on the next podcast.
Beautiful. Looking forward to it, mate.
Thanks, guys.